Hello and welcome to my second ever IFLAS live conversation. And joining me today, Stephen, there's a bit of shade there. Do you want to just come over this way? There we are. So as you can see how informal this is, that we are just checking out the lighting already now. So thank you for joining us. And of course, if you're not live, you're watching it later. Thanks for checking in. We're going to be talking about currency innovation for international development. Now, I'm here in Bali, in Ubud, and I've come here a few Christmases in a row, and every time I get to catch up with Stephen DeMeulenaere. Stephen has worked for over 25 years in the field of complementary currencies. Now, many people think that this just happened since Bitcoin over the last 6 years, but actually there's a much broader field, isn't there, Stephen?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What we're going to do today is have a chat about what complementary currencies, as some people call them, can do for international development, so social, economic, environmental issues in development, and then really where the sector of sort of the development profession, where is it at in terms of supporting these things? Perhaps, you know, why aren't these initiatives being supported as much as they might? And then what the implications are. So, Stephen, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone.
So, first up, for those people who are watching and don't know what a complementary currency is, could you say how do you describe them when you're talking to someone who doesn't know anything about this stuff?
Absolutely. Well, there are currencies that circulate below the national level, so that could be a regional area, but more likely it's in a city or in a community area. And there are three main types of complementary currency systems. One's a mutual credit system that allows people to offer their goods and services and their skills that are monetized to a particular amount, and that credit is extended to other people, and other people can also issue credit based on their own skills or what they have to offer to other people in the economy, and people use that as the money supply to exchange goods and services back and forth with each other in a local area. So it's basically it. Yeah, it's like peer-to-peer credit. You extend it to other people, they extend it to you, they extend it to other people, and so on. And rather than having an external money supply, just determine how much people can trade with each other.
And that was the type that you worked on for a long time. That was before the crypto stuff happened.
Absolutely.
And so, for what would be your simplest description of cryptocurrency?
Well, actually, simplest description of cryptocurrency is that a cryptocurrency token is an incentive to protect the network. So Bitcoin issues its currency every 10 minutes when a block is formed, and that's that token, or the Bitcoins that are created every 10 minutes pay the miner for having solved that block. So it's a totally different way of issuing currency, and it doesn't relate to the actual supply of goods and services in an economy or the real needs for exchange that are in an economy. It's only about protecting the network. And then there's another kind as well too, like the Brixton or Bristol pound you might have heard of. These are city-scale currencies in the UK and in Europe, other countries as well too, where the local municipality will issue a part of its annual budget, its annual tax budget, as a currency, and then tax that back. And they use that just to have some control over the local programs that they want to do in a particular urban area. And those are really interesting as well too.
So both Bitcoin and these sort of local town currencies like Brixton or Bristol pound seem to be the ones that people have heard of.
Yeah.
But these other complementary currencies, where it's about enabling exchange between people, issuing credit between people, these things most people I don't think have heard of. Maybe they've heard of a time bank where people are just recording what they've done for each other in terms of an hour.
Right.
But what's fascinating for me is that you were actually specialized in working on these mutual credit forms of currency in an international development context. So
yes, right here in Indonesia. Yep.
So looking at these things in terms of how they could promote social development or other aspects of international development.
Absolutely.
So I was wondering if you could give us an example of a project that that you worked on in the past that was funded by a development agency to achieve development outcomes.
Yes. Okay. In 1997, the Thai baht ran into severe difficulties, and that started to drag many other Asian economies down. And we know that as the Asian monetary crisis of 1997, 1998. Right? What that meant practically for people living in Thailand, Indonesia, many other countries, was that money was basically vacuumed out of rural areas and sent to Bangkok or to Jakarta to pay foreign debt. And so I was brought to Thailand in 1997 under a CUSO Canada sponsored project, working with a couple of volunteers, Menno Salverda and Jeff Powell, that were also, like seeing what was going on in the communities that they were working as the money all of a sudden dried up. And so they had rice mills, they had factories, small scale factories, farming, but nobody had any money to buy vegetables with. So CUSO brought me over to Thailand to help implement a local money system using mutual credit. So farmers or people were given a certain amount of credit. This was represented as a note that was in the form of a currency note that we made, not a Thai baht note, but a local currency note that allowed people to begin exchanging with each other, and it brought the markets back to life again in the local area. And now there was some issues with the Thai government. They didn't like that experiment very much because it was very, very innovative, and because they were they were completely scared by what happened during the Asian monetary crisis. Right. They wanted to shut it down. And so but the great thing that happened out of it was that the King of Thailand found out, and he quickly gave protection to the program under the Thailand Research Fund by the King of Thailand. Many other communities in Thailand have replicated the project, both mixed religious communities, but also within Buddhist, strictly Buddhist communities. And so there's has a great history. There's still a lot of activity going on in Thailand today. Wow, that's fascinating to hear. And did that get the notice of the wider development sector, either through academic publications or through all the different professional networks in international development? Was it recognised and was it analysed in terms of how much it achieved? I don't think it was to the extent that it should have, honestly. A lot of academics at the time thought that this was funny money and that it was temporary and that it was all for fun and that it didn't involve the real exchange of goods and services, because it's not easy to, if you're working with the United Nations in New York, you hear these things, going on in a rural area in Thailand that takes, 12 hours by bus to get to the nearest city from Bangkok, and then another 4 hours down dusty roads to get to the community where these kinds of things are happening. And a lot of people, are in the development sector, in the large agencies, have no connection to what's going on in these local areas. They're not familiar with northeastern Thailand. They might be familiar with Namibia or Angola or something like that. So that's what's happening. There's a disconnect. So the project you mentioned, it sounds quite similar to what a friend and colleague of ours, Will Ruddock's doing in Kenya and has been doing for the last few years. Very similar, and launched now in a number of informal settlements across Kenya and also in South Africa, a similar voucher scheme which is backed by the future spare capacity of participants. Yes, and very successful project. Yeah, and but also with, as far as I'm aware, so I'm on the board of his advisory board of his small NGO, and as far as I'm aware, no official development assistance. It's all very small grants from friends, basically, people who have become aware of the project and know Will and want to support it. But and that's also after having academic and UN publications reporting on what they're doing with the Bangla in Kenya. Right. So I tried with something called the UN Interagency Task Force on the Social and Solidarity Economy to get this type of currency innovation recognised as a form of domestic resource mobilisation, which would therefore be built into the way that people will think about financing development over the next 15 years. It's like talking crazy, basically. If people don't know that you can create your own credit and money systems, it just sounds like a bizarre idea. And so I think it was very difficult to get this into the mainstream of development community. And you were being funded. That was by CUSO, that project, back then. So
what's the landscape of official development money for complementary currencies today?
Today,
Yeah.
nearly non-existent.
Right.
I was supported in the past by several different agencies on different projects in many different countries. Most of the funding for those have dried up, or the organizations have closed. So it's not like we're being refused funding because our proposals aren't valid or anything. Those organizations simply don't exist, or their budgets are a tiny fraction of what they were 15 years ago. As a lot of development funding, provided by governments has gone to the main development agency as part of bilateral relations with the country. So, for example, here CUSO has already left Indonesia, they've already left Thailand, and most of the money that Canada gives out now is done through CIDA, the Canadian International Development Agency, which will fund corporations or large-scale projects or those kinds of things, rather than grassroots or innovative or those kinds of projects.
So bilateral aid agencies are giving larger sums of money to organisations that can work on massive projects in partnership with governments and big business.
Absolutely, right.
And therefore, although, I should ask you to say quite clearly what you think the pro-development outcomes of complementary currencies can be, but they're still at the experimental and fairly small scale level, so they're not that interesting to what bilateral aid agencies are doing at the moment. Is that what your sense?
Agencies depend on government funding, or maybe if it's a group of donors. So when I worked in the United Nations, one of our big concerns was not the delivery of services to the local community. It was making sure that our donors were happy so that the money would keep coming in the volumes that it was. Okay. And so when we come along and say, well, actually, you don't have to do it that way. You can create, communities can create their own money, and you can, their own money supply for their own exchange, and they can develop, they can create their own aid so that they can help themselves in a way that doesn't have to involve our continual input forever. They don't really like that much. It's like a doctor saying that they can cure you, and they can cure you, but they don't want to cure you because they want to keep on helping you. I mean, that's how they make their living. Okay. So I can understand how development agencies have been terrified of projects like this. That would mean that local communities wouldn't really need their help anymore because they've got the solution to their problems right in their hands. But they can manage it themselves. But
on the flip side, if the future of official development assistance might not be maintained at the gross levels that we see now, so like near the targets, but they might go down, then actually ways of funding projects that reduce the need for ongoing aid will be ideal. And I think possibly that could be why more development agencies, I know in the UK, DFID, the Department for International Development, are very interested in working more and more on entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. Right. So maybe there is a conversation to be had now between complementary currency experts and innovators on the one hand, like yourself, and the official development assistance space on how this, in the framework of entrepreneurship, and building entrepreneurship. Would you think so?
Absolutely, because these kinds of systems at the local level give people the basic tools that they need to form capital. So they learn entrepreneurship. They start off as single-person enterprises in their home, making value-added products from their farm, and that can develop the capital needed to eventually form a business. So it actually absolutely does. They're basically incubating entrepreneurship, and they do this in a way that doesn't require a lot of external capital. So I would totally agree with you that I think that it's very beneficial for aid agencies like DFID or CIDA and others to be looking at these kinds of systems that we've been working on for 20, 25 years or more.
But the skeptics would probably say, Stephen, come on, look at these things. Even the best examples are small scale. So I mentioned Bangladesh. Phenomenal success. Even in the first week, it increased the trade of participating businesses in the slum by 22%. But that was about 100 micro enterprises, so about 200 people. And if you're looking at development in a world of billions, where you have 1 billion hungry people, you can understand why they'll be saying, yeah, but we have to actually use our money with as maximum impact as possible. So how would you respond to that, and actually maybe have an idea, a strategy for why complementary currencies could actually achieve something at scale.
Right. Well, but this goes back to the problem you were talking about originally with Will Ruddock's grassroots economics program in Kenya. He couldn't get any funding.
Right.
So I mean, couldn't get the funding to do this at the time. Now he has more support coming in, but it's when you've only got a small amount of money, you look at the community that's right around you and start working there. It's totally possible to do large scale programs where you have field practitioners in each community, in dozens of communities, and replicating best practices from community to community.
The field of currency innovation that is incredibly ambitious is the for-profit venture capital backed cryptocurrency and blockchain space, which you're also very heavily involved in now.
Yes.
So do you think there could be some cross-fertilization of thinking there between what you used to do and what you're now involved in a way that could attract back development agencies to this space?
Yes, absolutely. Because we in the tech sector, in the blockchain sector, we see a lot of startup weekends or startup boot camps where innovation at the local level to deal with local programs is being incentivized through the private sector. We see a little bit of this going towards social purpose innovation or development, things that could benefit the development sector more, but we're not really seeing that being as much of a focus for development agencies. They have other things that they're, traditionally have been oriented towards. There's a bit of groupthink going on with how programs are designed for these countries that don't necessarily involve the people that are in those countries, and to the extent maybe that they should be. And there's still the grassroots movement, the efforts and people in those countries and people who want to support grassroots development to do these kinds of do these kinds of projects or these startup boot camps to encourage local people to be thinking in an innovative way. And an old program actually that just comes to mind with that is the OTOP program in Thailand, the One Tambon, One Product, which was an innovative program by the ministry in, I don't know what the name of the ministry is, Ministry of Development in Thailand, to encourage local entrepreneurship. And the government would sponsor businesses or individuals that pitched really great ideas. When they had farmers or they had housewives pitching ideas that would benefit their local communities. And those kinds of programs, they worked fantastically well in Thailand, and I could see them working very well in other places. But most times, people aren't given those kinds of opportunities to actually think creatively about how to find their own, locally appropriate solutions.
So it's interesting. If development agencies did try and back entrepreneurship in the field of complementary currency and peer-to-peer credit, there was an example with mobile money where DFID backed what became the M-Pesa. That also highlights how, if you take a pure for-profit approach with some government backing, you can end up with monopolies or duopolies with sort of possibly systemic risk there for the abuse of that monopoly position in terms of pricing, but also people just relying on one massive company that possibly could call the shots politically even. So do you think, therefore, that some of the thinking around good governance and setting the right frameworks for competition in an economy should be in the mind when say a DFID or the Canadian agency you mentioned decide to try and back innovation in fintech, blockchain, crypto, etc.?
Right, absolutely. That's essential.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm wondering, is there a specific project you could sort of tell us about that you could imagine about how a blockchain or a crypto could actually be sort of, if you just think off the top of your head now? I know I haven't asked you about this before.
Yeah,
so
that's
just think creatively about well, how could there be a really positive social development or sustainable development upside from a big ambitious project in either the complementary currency or blockchain or crypto space?
Absolutely. Well, as we know, M-Pesa doesn't have a blockchain-based transaction platform, so it potentially could be hacked. So it's very important, and we've seen this with the WeChat Pay app in China now, that they're moving towards a cryptocurrency based platform to ensure the financial security and can't be hacked.
WeChat in China WeChat Pay. Is
Yes.
that right?
So when you go to grocery stores in the or shopping in the mall, you can pay using your chat platform,
Right.
and that connects to your bank account.
And so WeChat themselves are interested in moving onto that in order to have added security. So they're looking at what would actually be a distributed ledger and an open source thing.
Yes, ideally.
Okay. I see. So that's interesting because of wanting to be resilient
Right. Absolutely. So moving that into development, about 6 months ago, I was contacted by a large former refugee camp in East Africa that has about 150,000 residents within its, you could say, its political area. Now the refugee camp is basically they've just become residents of this community together, and it's not just all people from one ethnic group. You know, it's an integrated community. They have their own shops and businesses, and there are aid agencies, smaller aid agencies, especially university-based ones that will send students. That seems to be the main source of grassroots innovation in development now, is universities sending students over for 2 to 2 month terms to teach them how to make shampoo or soap or health, health and nursing and midwife and practices and those kinds of things. They asked me about how to set up a currency system. Okay. And I was like, well, too many people have the technology to counterfeit the printed notes like we used to do it a long time ago. We need to have more robust and secure transaction platforms in these areas. And it's a closed loop. So local businesses have been asking for a platform like this, but I'm completely unable to deliver it to them. Okay. Because
you don't. Yeah, because no one's come along and said, here's support to build an NGO or an agency that can actually go in and make this type of thing happen.
Right. Or the large agencies, like they might have reported this or put this forward in front of large agencies, and they're like, we have no idea about how to do this. Yeah. And besides, that doesn't help us get more money from the people who donate to us, which pays us our salaries and so on.
So possibly
it could be something like that.
So I'm thinking, looking forward, and where the funds may come from to support complementary currency innovation for development. Could it actually be from the South itself? I know you're doing now work with the Chinese Communist Party. Is that right?
Just talk to them. Yeah, just talk. Yeah, spoke to the Communist Party of China in November to educate them about blockchain technologies and the benefits for China and their government for supporting these technologies.
So because these ideas they do seem to be the future, and everything's moving so fast, and you just look at the billions that are going into fintech for private capital. I think that if the international development community in the West is just behind the curve on this for the sort of the internal issues you mentioned, different priorities. Perhaps just engaging directly with agencies in the developing world, actually ministries, and helping them think it through and support the right kind of approaches in their own countries might be the way forward.
I think so.
You're trying
there
that with China.
With China, of course, Ecuador, reaches out a lot to the development sector, and they've had some great people come and working with them there to
the
restructure the economy.
Ecuador.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're dealing with a situation of dollarization.
And they've launched their own dollar-backed mobile money system. Right.
Yeah. So but they're, whatever we might think of those kinds of projects, at least they're reaching outside and saying, okay, we don't need to ask the IMF or the World Bank to be donated, giving us more loans, but we can actually, we can actually develop these projects on our own and find our own ways of financing them.
Good. So if you're interested in this topic, I will put a comment on the bottom of this video in a minute with links to Stephen's work, Complementary Currency Resource Centre, Coin Academy, and other things that Stephen does. And also, if you're interested in learning more about this, it would be great if you signed up for our free online course that the Institute runs. It starts again in February the 19th, and I'll put the link to the bottom of that, but it's ho.io/MOOC, M-O-O-C, and Stephen has helped tutor on past cohorts of that. So thank you for joining me today in our IFLAS Conversation Live, second go at this here in Bali, and thank you for watching. Cheers.